Don't you dare make that call, Delilah. My brother Nathan hissed through the phone, his voice cracking with desperation. But I was already dialing. When the IRS agent answered on the second ring, I said 5 words that would destroy everything my family had built over 3 generations. I have information about unreported income. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an avalanche. What happened next didn't just tear our family apart. It revealed that everything I thought I knew about the people who raised me was a carefully constructed lie. I never imagined I'd become the person who brought down Thornfield Enterprises, the construction empire my great-grandfather Jeremiah built from nothing in the dusty streets of Millbrook Falls back in 1958. For 32 years of my life, I had watched my family run this business with what I believed was integrity and honor. We were the Thornfields, pillars of the community, sponsors of the annual Harvest Festival, the family that employed half the town and kept Millbrook Falls from becoming another forgotten dot on the map of rural Tennessee. I was catastrophically wrong about everything. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like water through a crack in a foundation, until one rainy Tuesday in November when they physically barred me from entering our own conference room. That's when I understood that my family hadn't just been lying to the IRS for years, they'd been lying to me. And when they made the fatal mistake of assuming I was too naive, too trusting, too much of a good girl to understand what they were really discussing behind those mahogany doors, they sealed their own fate. Because I wasn't naive anymore. I was furious. And more importantly, I had documentation. But let me take you back to the beginning, because the warning signs had been there all along. I just wasn't ready to see them, or maybe I didn't want to. Sometimes the truth about the people you love most is the hardest truth to accept. Growing up as Delilah Thornfield in Millbrook Falls was like living in a Norman Rockwell painting, if Norman Rockwell had painted small-town royalty. Our house sat on Magnolia Avenue, a sprawling Victorian with wraparound porches and gardens that the Historical Society used for their annual tour. My father, Benjamin Thornfield, was the kind of man other men wanted to be. Tall, authoritative, with silver hair that never seemed out of place, and a handshake that could close deals and settle disputes with equal effectiveness. My mother, Eleanor, organized charity drives and headed the PTA with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 CEO. They were respected, admired, even beloved. Nathan, my older brother by 4 years, was the golden child, the one destined to inherit the kingdom. He had Dad's natural charisma and Mom's strategic mind, plus that indefinable quality that made people want to follow him. Even as kids, when we played construction site in our backyard sandbox, Nathan was always the foreman, delegating tasks and making decisions with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. And then there was me. I was the afterthought, the surprise baby who came along when my parents thought they were done having children. Not unwanted, exactly, but definitely unplanned. While Nathan spent his summers learning the business from the ground up, starting with sorting screws in the warehouse and eventually managing job sites, I was shuttled between piano lessons, tennis camp, and whatever activities would keep me occupied and out of the way of the real family business. Delilah's too gentle for construction, my father would say, whenever anyone asked why I wasn't more involved. She's got a tender heart, and this business requires tough decisions, and I don't want to harden her. I believed that for years. I actually took pride in being the gentle Thornfield, the one who chose social work over profit margins, who cared more about helping people than building things. I got my degree in social work from Vanderbilt University, came back to Millbrook Falls, and threw myself into working with at-risk youth at the community center. It felt meaningful, important, like I was contributing something valuable to the world, even if it wasn't the family legacy. But here's what I didn't understand then. Being kept away from the family business wasn't protection, it was containment. The first crack in my perfect family facade came 3 years ago, when I was 29 and finally stable enough in my own life to start paying attention to things beyond my immediate bubble. I was dating James Patterson, a CPA who'd moved to Millbrook Falls to work for Henderson and Associates, the accounting firm that handled most of the local businesses. James was everything my parents claimed to approve of: educated, professional, from a good family in Nashville. But I noticed they always seemed slightly uncomfortable when he was around. It was during a family barbecue in late spring when I first heard James ask my father a question that made the entire patio go quiet. "Mr. Thornfield, I've been looking at some of the county tax records for a project I'm working on, and I noticed something interesting about Thornfield Enterprises property assessments. The buildings listed don't seem to match what I can see from the road. Are there additional structures that are not visible from public access?" The silence that followed was brief but telling. My father recovered quickly, laughing in that hearty way he had when he wanted to change the subject. "James, son, you're off the clock. No need to think about work when there's perfectly good barbecue getting cold." But I saw the look that passed between my parents. I saw Nathan's jaw tighten, and I noticed that James wasn't invited to many family gatherings after that. When I asked James about it later, he shrugged it off. "Probably nothing. Sometimes property records get outdated, or there could be permits that haven't been updated. It's more common than you'd think." But something about the way my family had reacted stuck with me. It was the same energy I'd felt as a child when I'd accidentally walked in on adult conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. That sudden shift in atmosphere, like everyone was holding their breath until I left the room. The second crack came 6 months later when Mrs. Harriet Blackwell, one of my clients at the community center, mentioned that her late husband had worked for Thornfield Enterprises for 30 years before retiring in 2018. "Your family was good to Claude," she told me during one of our sessions. "Especially near the end when his health was failing. Your daddy made sure he got his full pension even though Claude couldn't work the last 6 months. Said it was the least they could do for someone who'd been so loyal." That seemed like exactly the kind of thing my family would do. Take care of their employees, go above and beyond what was required. I felt proud hearing it. But then Mrs. Blackwell said something that made my stomach turn. Of course, Claude always said your daddy took real good care of the boys who kept quiet about the weekend work. Said there was always extra money for the ones who understood that some jobs needed to stay off the books. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. "What kind of weekend work?" Mrs. Blackwell looked confused for a moment, like she was trying to remember details that didn't quite make sense. "Oh, side projects. Nothing official. Claude never talked about it much, just said there was good money in it if you didn't ask too many questions." I spent the rest of that session distracted, barely able to focus on Mrs. Blackwell's actual concerns. That evening, I tried to casually bring up the conversation with my parents. "I saw Mrs. Blackwell today. She mentioned that Claude used to do some weekend work for us." My mother's response was immediate and sharp. "Delilah, you know better than to listen to gossip from grieving widows. Harriet Blackwell has been confused since Claude passed. Half the things she says don't make sense." My father nodded gravely. "It's sad what grief can do to memory. Claude was a good worker, but toward the end, his mind wasn't what it used to be. Whatever Harriet thinks she remembers, it's probably just confused fragments." Their explanations made sense. Mrs. Blackwell was grieving, and grief could certainly distort memories. But there was something about how quickly they'd responded, how prepared their answers seemed, that left me unsettled. The third crack, the one that started the avalanche, came 8 months ago on what should have been a routine visit to the main office. I'd stopped by Thornfield Enterprises on a Thursday afternoon to drop off some paperwork for the community center's annual fundraiser. We were hoping to get the company to sponsor our summer programs, something they'd done for years without question. The main office was in a converted warehouse on Industrial Row, a building that had been in our family since the 1970s. I'd been there hundreds of times growing up, but usually just to use the bathroom or grab a soda from the break room while waiting for Dad to finish whatever he was working on. This time, I needed to find Nathan to get his signature on the sponsorship forms. The main office was empty. Our secretary, Linda, had left early for a dental appointment. So I wandered back toward the private offices, calling Nathan's name. "Nathan, are you back here? I need you to sign something." No response, but I could hear voices coming from the conference room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see that several people were inside, including Nathan and my father. I was about to knock when I heard Nathan say something that stopped me cold. The Richmond project cleared another $250 this quarter. All cash, no paper trail. Same setup as the Knoxville job. I froze. Richmond and Knoxville were both city contracts, public works projects that I knew were heavily regulated and documented. There shouldn't be any cash or no paper trail involved in government work. My father's voice was lower, harder to hear, but I caught fragments of "keep the crews small" and "Rodriguez knows how to handle the inspectors." Then I heard a third voice, one I didn't recognize. "What about the girl? She's been asking questions." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Then Nathan spoke again, his voice carrying the kind of authority I'd only heard him use with subcontractors who were causing problems. "Delilah doesn't know anything, and she won't. She's not involved in operations, and she never will be. Dad made sure that years ago. But what if she finds out? What if someone talks?" This time it was my father who answered, his voice carrying a coldness I'd never heard. "Delilah has always been idealistic, too idealistic for this business. That's why we keep her focused on her social work. As long as she feels like she's saving the world one teenager at a time, she won't look too closely at how we pay for her do-gooding." The words hit me like a physical blow, not just because of what they revealed about potential illegal activities, but because of how they talked about me, like I was a child who needed to be managed, a liability who couldn't be trusted with the truth about my own family's business. I stood there in that hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds, trying to process what I'd just heard. Then I heard footsteps moving toward the door, and I panicked. I rushed back down the hall, out through the main office, and to my car, leaving the sponsorship forms on Linda's desk with a hastily scrawled note. For the next 2 weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. I found myself lying awake at night, replaying every interaction I'd had with my family, looking for signs I'd missed. During the day, I'd catch myself studying my father's face during casual conversations, wondering what he was really thinking, what he wasn't telling me. I tried to convince myself that I'd misunderstood, that there was an innocent explanation for what I'd heard. Maybe cash meant something different in construction than what I thought. Maybe no paper trail was just industry jargon I didn't understand. Maybe I was making something sinister out of perfectly normal business practices. But then I started noticing other things, like how Nathan would suddenly change the subject whenever I walked into a room where he was on the phone, how my father would close his laptop quickly when I approached his desk, how both of them seemed to have developed an uncanny ability to know exactly where I was at all times, often calling to check in when I was anywhere near the office or job sites. I also started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored, like how our family's lifestyle had always seemed slightly disconnected from what I understood about the construction business. We lived well, very well, but not in the obvious way that some wealthy families did. We didn't have the biggest house in town or the most expensive cars, but we never seemed to worry about money. Vacations were never budgeted for, they were just planned. When I needed something for school or wanted to pursue an expensive hobby, the answer was always yes, without any discussion of cost. Even more telling was how generous my parents were with local charities and community organizations. The Thornfield family name was on half the buildings in Millbrook Falls. The library, the youth center, the new wing of the hospital. My parents gave away what seemed like enormous sums of money, and they did it consistently year after year without ever appearing to strain their finances. For a construction company in a small Tennessee town, even a successful one, that level of disposable income seemed optimistic. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. And the more questions I had, the more I realized that my family had spent 32 years making sure I never developed the knowledge or curiosity to ask them. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to stop being the good daughter who stayed in her lane. I decided to find out what Thornfield Enterprises was really doing with all that off-the-books cash.
What I discovered over the next 6 months would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family, my community, and myself. But it would also give me the power to finally step out of the shadows they'd kept me in my entire life, even if it meant destroying everything we'd built in the process. Because sometimes, when you discover that your entire life has been built on a foundation of lies, the only honest thing to do is tear it all down and start over, even if you're the one holding the match. To understand how deeply the betrayal cut, you need to understand what Thornfield Enterprises meant to our family and to Millbrook Falls. This wasn't just a business, it was our identity, our legacy, and the economic heartbeat of an entire community. My great-grandfather, Jeremiah Thornfield, arrived in Millbrook Falls in 1958 with nothing but a rusty pickup truck, a toolbox, and an unshakable belief that honest work would eventually pay off. The town was barely more than a crossroads then, just a few hundred people clustered around a textile mill that would close within the decade. But Jeremiah saw potential where others saw only struggling farmland and empty storefronts. He started small, fixing porches, replacing roofs, building chicken coops for the local farmers. But when the textile mill closed in 1962, leaving half the town unemployed, Jeremiah made a decision that would define our family for generations. Instead of leaving for bigger opportunities in Nashville or Memphis, like so many others, he doubled down on Millbrook Falls. "This town's got good bones," he used to say, according to family stories I'd heard 1,000 times. "Sometimes you just need to reinforce the foundation." That became more than just a business philosophy. It became our family motto: reinforce the foundation, build something that lasts, take care of your community, and your community will take care of you. By the time my grandfather, William, took over in the 1980s, Thornfield Enterprises had grown from a one-man handyman service into the largest construction company in 3 counties. We built the new high school, the expanded hospital, the shopping center that brought the first chain restaurants to Millbrook Falls. When the state decided to widen Highway 47 through town, it was Thornfield crews that did the work. When developers started building the Millbrook Falls subdivisions that tripled our population in the 1990s, every third house had our company sign in the front yard.
But more than just the big projects, we were woven into the daily life of the community in ways that made us indispensable. Need a playground built for the elementary school? Thornfield Enterprises donated the materials and labor. Church roof damaged in a storm? We'd have a crew there before the insurance adjuster even returned your call. Elderly widow needs her front steps repaired. My grandfather would send someone over that afternoon and somehow forget to send a bill. This wasn't charity, it was investment. The goodwill we built in the community paid dividends in ways that couldn't be measured on a balance sheet. When the county put construction contracts out for bid, everyone knew Thornfield would get the job, not just because we submitted the lowest number, but because we were family. When young people graduated high school and needed work, they came to us first. When established contractors from Nashville or Knoxville tried to move into our territory, they found themselves mysteriously unable to secure permits, find reliable subcontractors, or navigate the labyrinth of local regulations that we'd helped write. My father, Benjamin, inherited this empire in 1995, when I was 12 years old. By then, Thornfield Enterprises employed 47 people full-time and probably another 20 part-time seasonal workers. We had a fleet of trucks and heavy machinery that was the envy of every other contractor in Middle Tennessee. Our main facility on Industrial Row included not just offices, but a fully equipped workshop, a materials warehouse that could supply half the county, and a dispatch center that coordinated everything from routine maintenance calls to million-dollar infrastructure projects. But what made my father different from his predecessors wasn't just his business acumen, it was his vision for what Thornfield Enterprises could become. Jeremiah had built a local company that served the community. William had expanded it into a regional player that could compete for bigger contracts. Benjamin wanted to build something that would last forever. "We're not just contractors," he would tell employees at our annual Christmas party, held every year in the warehouse with tables made from sawhorses and plywood, decorated with lights my mother had been collecting since before I was born. "We're the people who build the future,
Every foundation we pour, every wall we raise, every roof we put on, that's not just construction, that's creating homes where families will make memories for generations. That's building the infrastructure that lets communities thrive. That's legacy work. And it was. By the time I graduated college in 2014, Thornfield Enterprises was handling contracts worth tens of millions of dollars annually. We'd built the new Civic Center, the renovated courthouse, 3 different shopping plazas, and countless residential developments. We were the default contractor for the school district, the city, and the county. Our crews were working on projects as far away as Cookeville and Clarksville. More importantly, we were good at what we did. Our projects came in on time and under budget. Our safety record was impeccable. Our employees stayed with us for decades. We had guys like Claude Blackwell who'd worked for us their entire careers, building their retirement plans around the steady paychecks and generous benefits that came with being part of the Thornfield family. That's what made the community respect us, but it was the personal touch that made them love us. My father never forgot that Millbrook Falls was small enough that everyone knew everyone, and relationships mattered more than profit margins. When the Henderson family lost their house in a fire, we rebuilt it at cost. When the high school football team needed new bleachers, we somehow found room in the budget to upgrade the whole athletic complex. When families struggled to make mortgage payments during the 2008 recession, we quietly hired their breadwinners for consulting work that mostly involved showing up and being paid to learn skills they'd never need to use. This wasn't just good business, it was good citizenship. And as the only daughter of Benjamin Thornfield, I was raised to understand that being part of this community meant more than just living here. It meant being responsible for its well-being. That's why I chose social work instead of business school. I wanted to help people in a different way than construction could, but I still wanted to help people. I thought I was honoring the family tradition of service, just through a different avenue. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly this narrative served my family's purposes. They got to be proud of my idealism while ensuring I never developed the knowledge or curiosity to examine their business practices too closely. They could point to my work at the community center as evidence of the Thornfield family's commitment to helping others while keeping me far enough away from the actual operation that I couldn't stumble across anything problematic. It was a beautiful system, really. I was the perfect front, the socially conscious daughter who proved that Thornfield Enterprises wasn't just about profit, who could represent the family at charity events and community meetings, while the men handled the complicated business decisions. I was living proof that we were the good guys, that our success came from hard work and community values, rather than anything more complicated. The irony is that I genuinely believed in everything I was representing. I thought my family's generosity came from abundance, not guilt. I thought our community connections were built on mutual respect, not mutual dependency. I thought the reason people trusted us was because we'd earned that trust through decades of honest dealing.
I was proud to be a Thornfield, proud of what my great-grandfather had built, what my grandfather had grown, and what my father was expanding. When people in town introduced me as Benjamin's daughter or one of the Thornfield girls, I felt that recognition as validation. We mattered here, we belonged here. We were part of something bigger than ourselves. Every summer, we hosted the annual Thornfield Family Picnic in Riverside Park. Officially to celebrate our employees, but really to celebrate the community we'd helped build. The whole town would show up, current employees and retirees, city council members, and school board trustees. Families we'd built houses for and kids who played on playgrounds we'd constructed. My father would give a speech about community and legacy and the importance of building things that last. My mother would organize games for the children and make sure every elderly person had a comfortable place to sit in the shade, and I would work the crowd, shaking hands and asking about people's families, feeling like I was representing something important and valuable and permanent. Those picnics were my favorite day of the year. They represented everything I loved about our family and our place in the world. They made me feel like I was part of something that mattered, something that would outlast all of us and continue making the world a better place long after we were gone. The last picnic was in July, just 4 months before everything fell apart. I remember feeling especially proud that day because we just announced our latest community project, a new playground for the elementary school, complete with equipment designed for children with disabilities. It was something I'd suggested after working with several families at the community center. And seeing my father not just approve the idea but expand it beyond what I'd even imagined felt like validati. On that I was finally contributing something meaningful to the family legacy. I spent that entire afternoon believing I was living in a Norman Rockwell painting surrounded by people who respected my family, working for a company that made the world better. Part of a tradition that stretched back generations and would continue for generations more. If someone had told me that day that within 6 months I would be the one to destroy everything we'd built, I would have thought they were insane. But that's the thing about living inside a lie, you don't realize how much of your identity depends on that lie being true until the moment it all comes crashing down. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.